Good evening. Just dropped the little ones off. Just thinking about some things, going through things with them and just conversations with my son. And it got me thinking, my kids know for the most part when I say something, that's the way it is. That's just how it's going to happen. It's not just a matter of discipline or telling them what to do, but they know if I tell them we're going to do something or if I say something, I mean what I say. Now, this hasn't always been the case. It took a long time to get to this point, especially with them, because as a parent, we run into things all the time where we're at the grocery store or we're out doing something or we're just at home trying to get things done, and the kids don't always listen. They don't always agree. They don't always do what they're supposed to be doing, and that's okay. That's kids. But I used to be really bad about empty threats or, just kind of saying things to get along and then not always backing it up. And, when that's applicable in life, sometimes things come up. You're always going to run into a situation where you get busy or life happens. But I've really learned how much of an impact following through with what I say has made, not only in my life, but with them. And I've really noticed that it takes a lot of the questioning out. My daughter, she's a sweetheart. She's small and she's extremely sassy. And she's in that rebellious, I'm going to argue with everything you say state. She knows it doesn't get by with me, and she knows that I don't listen to half of what she says, and it frustrates her because I don't listen to whining. And I tell her that I can't understand whine. It's a foreign language to me. It's worked, but she is a female, and they do test us as often as we let them. But that's one thing that I remember about growing up, that, people are so quick to say things when it sounds like a great idea. Like, oh yeah, that sounds fun, we'll do that. That's great. And then it never happens. It used to be a thing with family. I remember a lot of times, people would say they'd come get me and then they didn't. Something else would come up, and that's okay. I always made the best of the time that I had. At first it was rough, but I remember the impact that it did have on me and the learning curve that it kind of threw at me. But the main thing that I remember is the fact that even as a child, it made me lose respect for someone. And if you don't respect someone, you're not going to listen to them. You're not going to look up to them. And when it's a parent or an authority figure or someone who is somebody you admire and look up to, when they don't follow through with what they say, and you don't respect someone, it's really hard, because it takes away in a very, not necessarily cold world, but in a world where you don't have as many good role models as you'd like in the lives of the people that mean the most to you. I had some good role models in my life that most of them came along later in life. When I was younger, my hero was my grandfather. He was the best man that I remember my entire childhood. He passed away when I was 15 years old. And, I've grown a lot closer to my grandma since then, which I'm thankful for that, because she's a great woman. I'd do anything in the world for her, and she would do the same for me. She has. But, as that father figure, as that authority figure, my grandpa was a man of what he said. If he said something, he did it. He didn't take shit from anybody, except for my grandma. She knew how to put him in his place, but at the same time, they had that very traditional masculine-feminine relationship, and it worked really well for him. And it wasn't a matter of control. It wasn't a matter of anything other than just they respected each other. Is when they said they would do something, they did it. That's not the only reason, but primarily, your word is your bond. Your word has to mean something, or people don't take you serious. And I'm learning more and more as I get older that I've drifted away from a lot of the things that I used to do when I was younger, when I was that young man in my prime who was the leader of the house and all this stuff. And, you know, life happens, events happen, things get difficult, and you kind of fall off of that. And then you stand back up and you try to regain it. And I tell you what, it's a lot harder to regain something once you've started giving it up. You know, you give up parts of your manhood, you give up parts of who you are as a person, and trying to gain those things back, you know, the problem you run into is, yeah, it's easy to start making changes and start doing the things, but the impact that you've already made on the people in your life, you know, it's not as easy to regain that from then. It takes time and consistency, you know. So the biggest part with me has been with my kids. You know, they're the only thing in the world that kind of trumps what I have going on. And, you know, I've always got to stay with my purpose. I've always got to stay with the things that make me myself. And I do my best to still do normal life things and involve my children in it, in a sense that it's not always giving them what they want or not always doing the things that they want, because it's normal life. You know, I may not have them all the time, but the time that I do have them, I don't want to be that Disney dad. I don't want to be the one that we just go do the fun stuff all day long and spend a ton of money, and, you know, it's just a party and I'm their friend, and that's not the way it works. You know, that's not how a role model works. That's not how a father or a man works. You know, you teach kids bad habits that way, and then when you say you don't have the money, or say you do have something that's more family-oriented plan, then you've got a spoiled kid that's pissed, and you've got to deal with that. And then, you know, I've been through this, and then it goes into the, you know, they're upset, they don't want to talk, or they want to go do something with the other parent, and that's rough. But I remember the turning point of when that stuff changed, when it was finally the realization that my children weren't babies anymore. You know, I couldn't baby them anymore. I had to let them grow up. I had to teach them to grow up. I had to start teaching them how to have life skills. And, you know, I've had the opportunity to really teach not only my own but others' kids some really cool stuff. You know, life skills, things that when they get older they're going to be able to apply. You know, things that I wish that someone would have taught me when I was young. But fortunately, you know, there's men that came into my life later in life, you know, and took me in his family and really kind of helped mold me into a better man, into a better person, and I am very grateful for that. You know, that doesn't undo, you know, the stuff that came from being a child and having to go through that mess, but at the same time, it really makes an impact, and it goes back to what I've said in the past. You know, you've got to learn to let old stuff go. You've got to learn to move on and start being accountable for that kind of things. But, you know, in a nutshell, when you say something, mean it. You know, yeah, like I said, life happens, things come up, stuff doesn't always work out exactly how you want it to. But if you say you're going to do something, do it. You know, if you are put in charge of something, handle it. And if you can't, then find a way to. Find a constructive way to. Because for one, not only will people not respect you, but you're not going to respect yourself. You're not going to ever hold yourself accountable. You're not ever going to grow if you don't. You know, a friend actually brought up a really good idea a little while back to me. He said, you know, the easiest thing to do, especially when you're busy all the time, is if you say something and you have a goal or a plan, write it down. Because once you write it down, it makes it a lot more serious. Because then you've put that out there. You put it out into the universe, other than just in your thoughts. And, you know, it gives you a little bit more accountability. It gives you a little bit more presence of the situation. You know, because when your words aren't congruent with your actions, I mean, like I said, you don't have any respect for yourself, because you don't have to follow through with anything. You know, you don't make wise choices. You make empty promises, and not just promises, you just say things, and people don't ever take you seriously. But, you know, when you do set out to do things, when you do say things and you actually follow through, that gives you a feeling of self-worth. You know, that gives you a feeling of balance and of pride, and that's usable pride. That's actually good pride, not the, you know, ego-feeding pride. So, if you take anything away from this, you know, be convicted in what you say. Follow through with what you say. And it may not always be easy, and it may not always be pretty. But be of your word. Now, I'm not making any money off of these. That's not the purpose of these. But it is nice to see that people are starting to react to them and notice these, you know, because that's my purpose of this, is to try to reach out and do something for other people, because, you know, there's been a lot of help that I've gained, a lot of insight that I've gained off of, you know, not just YouTube, but other people. So, you know, if you're able to take anything away from this, then, you know, like it, share it, let other people get to see it. Maybe it'll help them. If not, that's okay. Thank you guys for taking the time to check it out. Have a good night.